Chapter 1231. It was exactly because of these two soul skills that none of the powerful beings of his generation wished to face him in battle. The Dark Phoenix Douluo had fallen prey to this combination, and the most damning part about this was not that her Phoenix reverence parade had been withdrawn. Instead, it was that her domain had also reverted back to 1 second ago, which was prior to its release. Thus, all of the evil soul masters who had just regained some mobility were instantly plunged into the figurative quicksand again. All of a sudden, Zhang Xin's third soul ring lit up, and the passion in his eyes suddenly turned into despair. The look in his eyes struck the beholder with the feeling that he had lost something that was most precious to him forever. Dazzling specks of light instantly appeared over the entire battlefield like countless drops of tears that were proliferating outward. Thump, 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 thump. A string of dull thumps rang out, and one head after another exploded like watermelons. All of those evil soul masters were struck by the feeling that their biggest regrets had instantly been magnified countless times, and their hearts were unable to bear this agony. Thus, their heads exploded in their excruciating pain, and it seemed that this was the only way they could free themselves from this unspeakable torment. There were over 100 evil soul masters present, and over 2/3 of them had their heads detonated by these countless specks of light. Even those who managed to survive were all throwing up mouthfuls of blood and had turned deathly pale. One had to realize that all of the evil soul masters that had been sent out on this operation were at least at the Soul King level, yet Zhang Xin was still able to wreak such widespread havoc in an instant despite the fact that he was facing someone as powerful as the Dark Phoenix Douluo. This was the power of one of the two most powerful beings of the Tang sect. It had been over 50 years since the Heartless Duo and the Amorous Douluo had unleashed their power in battle, and many people had already forgotten their abilities. Now that Zhang Xin had stepped in to oppose these evil soul masters, everyone was given another poignant reminder of just how fearsome he and Cao Daja were. Remorse. This was the name of Zhang Xin's third soul skill. The Dark Phoenix Douluo had also been affected by this, and she felt as if she had been taken back to the moment where Yang Ming had valiantly sacrificed himself to limit the explosions of the Godslayer missiles. Her heart was instantly overwhelmed by boundless remorse, and she didn't have any spare capacity to assist the other evil soul masters. Among those of the same cultivation rank, evil soul masters were very powerful, and almost no normal soul masters could oppose them. However, in exchange for this power, they had to endure far more pain and suffering than normal soul masters, which resulted in more holes in their psyche to be exploited. Thus, to evil soul masters, Amorous Douluo Zhang Xin was even more fearsome than Heartless Douluo Cao Daja. After unleashing 3 soul skills in succession, Zhang Xin continued in his assault without any pause. The despair in his eyes quickly transitioned into the purest and sincerest emotions, and he finally thrust his amorous sword forward. Sword projections flashed, and a streak of dazzling and translucent light surged through the air. The sword projections were extremely grandiose and spectacular, and the Dark Phoenix Douluo was struck by the illusion that Zhang Xin had already transformed into Yang Ming right before her eyes, and he was expressing to her the pain in his heart, as well as his most genuine emotions. Zhang Xin's eyes lit up further and further, and the light in his eyes fused as one with the sword projections from his amorous sword. There was no killing intent radiating from the sword whatsoever, but it was piercing through the air directly toward her. Second soul skill, genuine. In the face of this soul skill, those with lackluster spiritual power would very likely end up dead before they even knew how they had perished. This was a soul skill that could impact a single target or an entire battlefield, and it could instantly reduce the enmity that his opponents harbored toward him by a significant degree. In the eyes of his enemies, this soul skill would make him appear as if he had transformed into the one that they trusted or loved the most. However, the Dark Phoenix Douluo was a rank 97 hyper Douluo, which made her one of the most powerful beings in the dark world of evil soul masters, and the lethal threat concealed within the genuine soul skill instantly made her soul core titan. The man standing before her eyes was clearly Yang Ming, and he was laying his heart bare for her to see, but she had to grit her teeth with all her might and scream at herself over and over again that this wasn't real. She was finally forced to release her 7th soul skill, and a slightly hoarse phoenix cry rang out as she transformed into a massive black phoenix. It had been many years since she had last seen Zhang Xin, and even though they were acquainted with one another, she had never faced Zhang Xin in battle before, so she didn't know just how powerful he was. Only during this first clash was she truly made aware of just how fearsome this veteran limit Douluo was. Even with her immense powers, she was struck by a sense of powerlessness in his presence. She didn't care about all of the other evil soul masters anymore. All she wanted was to get away from this place and away from this terrifying man as quickly as possible. The black phoenix vigorously flapped its wings, releasing a vast expanse of dark purple light, which was constantly crumbling in the face of the amorous sword, but it at least bought her some time. Taking advantage of this opportunity, she turned and fled without any hesitation. "You're not getting away," Zhang Xin called out in a gentle voice. He had finally tracked down one of the 4 heavenly monarchs of the Holy Spirit cult. How could he allow her to get away? Zhang Xin heaved a faint sigh as he vanished on the spot, and the domain around him underwent a peculiar transformation. The translucent domain suddenly took on more substance, and everything in the surrounding area transformed into the past Shrek Academy. There was a gargantuan tree, and the top of which stood a young man. This was a white-robed young man who had a head of flowing long hair and held a spear in his hand. He was merely standing still on the spot, but it was as if he were the core of the entire world. He had once dominated the Soul Master world and was considered to be an invincible being. Countless female soul masters of the highest caliber had confessed their love to him, but he turned down all of them without any hesitation to pursue the woman he loved. Countless powerful beings had challenged him in the hope of dethroning this legendary man, only to fall before his divine atlas spear. The giant black phoenix flew toward him, seemingly in an uncontrollable manner, and no matter how vigorously it flapped its wings, it was unable to get away from him. From the perspective of those outside the domain, the black phoenix was simply flying in circles around Zhang Xin. The amorous one is left to rule what could have been domain was certainly not that easy to free oneself from, and countless powerful beings had fallen within it. This was a combination of both his battle armor domain and his spiritual domain. His battle armor domain was known simply as amorous, and he had named his own spiritual domain to rule what could have been, and the combination of the two thus resulted in this domain. Even the almighty Dark Phoenix Douluo had instantly fallen under the control of this domain, thereby adding another feather to the already illustrious cap of the #1 control system soul master on the continent. Cuckoo, cuckoo. As expected of the limit Douluo, who's considered to be the least favorable opponent among his peers, Dark Phoenix is no match for you. I don't really like her, but I can't let you kill her. Greetings, amorous Douluo. A peal of tinkling laughter suddenly rang out, and it should have been quite a pleasing sound to the ears, but it was somehow extremely eerie instead, and sent chills running down the listener's spine. Zhang Xin's brows furrowed slightly upon hearing this. It was quite incredible that this woman had gotten so close to him while escaping his detection. He had already guessed that the Holy Spirit cult had more powerful beings lurking in the shadows, but he didn't think that this would be someone who was just as, if not more, powerful than the Dark Phoenix Douluo. A figure slowly skipped her way out of the darkness, and this was a little girl who appeared to be in her teens. Her eyes were pure and adorable, and her hair had been arranged into a pair of buns on her head, thereby further contributing to her youthful and energetic appearance. She wore a short-sleeved mini dress that revealed her fair arms and legs, and as she skipped along, the buns in her hair gradually began to undo themselves, hanging down as a pair of large braids on either side of her head like a pair of elongated bunny ears. The full length of her hair quickly trailed down onto the ground behind her. Chapter 1232. Zhang Xin's brows furrowed even further at the sight of her. He was completely sure that this woman was at least at the hyper Douluo level, and her spiritual power had reached the spirit domain realm as well, so at the very least, she was superior to the Dark Phoenix Douluo in that aspect. What was most perplexing to him was that there was no powerful being of her description in his memory, which meant that this evil soul master had definitely only recently risen to prominence. It was quite unsettling to think that the Holy Spirit cult had such a powerful being lurking among their ranks. Are you one of the 4 heavenly monarchs as well? Despite being able to sense how powerful this woman was, Zhang Xin remained calm and collected, while the Dark Phoenix Douluo continued to fly around him in a tormented state within his domain. I am. They all call me Dark Belle, but you can call me Little Belle if you'd like. Can you release her and let me take her away? I'm sure you wouldn't turn down someone as adorable as me. Why don't you hand her over, and we can be friends? The evil soul master giggled. Zhang Xin replied in a cold manner. Friends? Do you think our Tang sect would befriend your Holy Spirit cult? The amorous one is left to rue what could have been domain expanded as he spoke, and it quickly illuminated Dark Belle's body. Dark Belle pouted in a displeased manner. You're a really boring guy. You know that. Everyone's spoken so highly about you for so many years. I wanted to witness your powers for myself as well. She gently waved her right hand through the air as she spoke, and 9 soul rings, consisting of 6 blacks and 3 reds, emerged from beneath her feet. Even Zhang Xin couldn't help but be taken aback at the sight of her soul ring configuration. Almost all of the beings on the Douluo continent who possessed a set of soul rings of this caliber were limit Douluo, which made them part of an extremely exclusive group of the most powerful beings on the continent. The Holy Spirit cult had a sovereign and 2 emperors above the 4 heavenly monarchs. Just a heavenly monarch alone was already this fearsome. How powerful would the sovereign and emperors be? In Zhangxin's memory, he could only confidently say that he had encountered one of those 3 powerful beings many years ago. That man had been defeated by Douluo Yanming, but managed to escape with his life and fell into complete obscurity thereafter. The unknown was always the most terrifying. Who could have envisioned that the Holy Spirit cult would reappear on the continent after remaining dormant for over 10,000 years? 10,000 years ago, the Holy Spirit cult had sought to bring disaster to this world, but unfortunately for them, they encountered one of the most exceptional generations of Shrek's 7 monsters. In particular, their core member and the founder of the Spirit Pagoda, Spirit Douluo Yuao, was considered to be one of the greatest soul masters of all time. He had led that generation of Shrek's 7 monsters to completely crush the Holy Spirit Douluo and slew almost all of the high-ranking members of the cult. This made many people think that the Holy Spirit cult was just a thing of the past, but who would have imagined that they would resurface after all this time? Furthermore, they had made themselves known to the world by detonating 2 Godslayer missiles in a bombing of unprecedented proportions. They followed up their attack on Heaven Dou City by destroying Shrek City and the Tang Sect headquarters, thereby announcing their return in the most horrific and spectacular way imaginable. The amorous Douluo and heartless Douluo had already realized that the Holy Spirit cult had to have made ample preparations before they decided to resurface, but they still had heavy hearts. As they witnessed the terrifying power that the Holy Spirit cult had accumulated begin to reveal itself, an inky black bell appeared in Dark Bell's hand, and there was a series of peculiar runes on the surface of the bell. These runes were shimmering with green light and emitting faint green mist, creating a rather unsettling sight to behold. Halos of light began to proliferate outward from beneath her feet, and at the same time, a suit of dark green battle armor appeared to encase her entire body. In the face of the amorous Douluo, even the most conceited of individuals didn't dare to let down their guard. Her suit of battle armor was also of the 3-word level, and the halo beneath her feet was slightly larger than even that of the Dark Phoenix Douluo. An eerie sobbing sound began to echo in the air as if there were countless people weeping at once. I've heard that the amorous Douluo is the #1 control system soulmaster on the Douluo continent. What a coincidence. I'm also a control system soulmaster. Let's see whose control is superior. The small bell in her hand expanded to a diameter of over a meter as she spoke, and she gently shook it to release a tinkling chime. A layer of sound waves proliferated from the bell before fusing as one with the halo beneath her feet. The sound waves were green in color, and they seemed to possess form and substance as they spread outward. Alongside these sound waves were the shrill cries of countless dark green tormented vengeful spirits, and in the instant that this green halo clashed with the amorous one is left to rue what could have been domain, a peculiar scene unfolded. The vengeful spirits exploded one after another in the face of the amorous one is left to rue what could have been domain. But as they exploded, the baleful aura that they released became more than 10 times more powerful than before. This instantly granted the green domain a significant power boost, and it began to devour the amorous Douluo's domain in a frenzy with its unrivaled aura of resentment. Thus, Zhangxin's domain was affected, as was his control over the Dark Phoenix Douluo, and the giant black phoenix began to shudder violently as if it were about to escape from his control. This was a sound wave control type evil martial soul, and Zhangxin could sense that it seemed to be able to suppress his abilities to a certain extent, so this matchup had clearly been set up by design to target him. There was no way that the Holy Spirit cult could have known that he would come here today, but they had such a powerful evil soul master among their ranks that could target his abilities, so it was quite clear that they had been planning everything meticulously for a very long time. There was still a large disparity between the powers of Dark Bell and the amorous Douluo. She was a rank 98 hyper Douluo, and even though there was only a gap of 1 soul power rank between them, it would be no exaggeration to compare this with the gulf between heaven and earth. Furthermore, she only possessed a suit of 3-word battle armor, which was vastly inferior to a suit of 4-word battle armor. However, her powers were able to effectively counter Zhangxin's abilities, and by detonating one vengeful spirit after another, she was able to bridge the power gap between them and face him on even terms. As such, the situation wasn't looking good for Zhangxin. Once Dark Bell freed the Dark Phoenix Douluo from his domain, it would be very difficult for him to stop both of them from getting away. It was also right at this moment that a ball of golden light suddenly illuminated the darkness and descended from the sky like a golden sun, plummeting straight toward the spot where the 2 domains were clashing. Dark Bell's expression changed slightly at the sight of this ball of golden light. She had engaged in a conversation with Zhangxin earlier in order to buy herself enough time to accumulate power. She had never imagined that she and the Dark Phoenix Douluo would be enough to defeat Zhangxin. All she hoped for was to be able to disrupt Zhangxin to the extent that the 2 of them could escape. It was undoubtedly the case that this was a trap, so the amorous Douluo definitely wouldn't have been the only one who had been sent here. However, in her eyes, the only ones who posed a real threat to her in the Tang Sect were its 2 limit Douluo. Much to her alarm, the golden figure that was descending from the sky struck her with a sense of devastating pressure, making her feel as if there were a giant great beast plummeting toward her, threatening to reduce her to dust. What was even more astonishing to her was that the ball of golden light was truly like a sun. The scorching blood essence fluctuations that it was radiating were the bane of all vengeful spirits. They had set up this elaborate plan to attack the convoy underground firstly as they wanted to avoid having to face the mechas and fighter aircrafts in the sky, and also because vengeful spirits feared sunlight, so her powers would be severely debilitated when fighting on the surface during daylight hours. However, this golden sun had lit up the entire underground world, and she felt as if the light of the true sun had flooded into the darkness. Her domain had originally been evenly matched against Zhangxin's domains, but it was now being dominated and suppressed. As a result, the Dark Phoenix Douluo fell firmly under his control again. Buy me 10 minutes, Zhangxin said in a concise manner. Meanwhile, the golden sun crashed violently down onto the ground. Just as Zhangxin had been astonished by the emergence of Dark Bell was also stunned by the appearance of this ball of golden light. Her skeptical and paranoid nature immediately urged her to fall back in retreat to avoid a direct confrontation, and she rushed back over 100 meters in a flash, leaving a trail of after images in her wake. Boom! The golden light struck the ground like a meteorite, and the first thing that Dark Bell saw was a pair of golden wings. Those wings completely enshrouded their owner within, and they were completely devoid of feathers, but covered by golden rhomboid scales. Each and every scale had an extremely sharp appearance, and translucent golden light was swelling over them. Chapter 1233. In the instant that he landed on the ground, a dragon's roar that was imbued with peerless might erupted, and the powerful blood essence fluctuations instantly proliferated outward to suppress all of the howling vengeful spirits. Not only that, but scorching crimson golden light was surging through the air, illuminating the surrounding area and clearing away the darkness. The golden wings spread open to reveal a tall and broad figure in a suit of golden armor. The man's face was concealed by a golden visor, and there were dazzling golden scales all over his suit of armor. The golden dragon patterns on the suit of armor all seemed to be releasing dull dragon's roars, and the patterns weren't heavy at all, but they were full of substance. Hai's arms were particularly thick and strong, and aside from the layer of golden scales over those arms, they seemed to also have been encased in even larger pieces of armor. The armor on his arms resembled golden crystals, and this crystalline appearance was a signature trait for suits of 3-word battle armor. His hands had transformed into dragon claws, and the surface of the armor on his arms seemed to be covered in enlarged dragon scales. Dragon patterns extended all the way from the tips of his claws to his elbows, while a sharp spike protruded from each elbow joint. He also held a golden jewel-tipped spear in his right hand. This was a partial suit of 3-word battle armor, so did this mean that this golden figure wasn't all that powerful? Dark Bell instantly formulated her judgment. It was undoubtedly the case that this man seemed to be wearing battle armor, but those scales were most likely a part of his martial soul, while the only pieces of actual battle armor were on his arms. For a battle armor master, the process of upgrading their suit of battle armor actually made them very vulnerable, as prior to completing a suit of upgraded battle armor, they would actually find themselves to be less powerful than before. This man was a perfect example of this. Only the forearm guards of his suit of 3-word battle armor had been completed, and while they did look quite spectacular, he wasn't even a 3-word battle armor master. In contrast, Dark Bell was a 3-word battle armor master of the highest caliber, and if it weren't for the Holy Spirit cult's lack of access to a divine blacksmith, she would have upgraded to a suit of 4-word battle armor long ago. After instantly recognizing the disparity between their powers, Dark Bell quickly realized that she had been bluffed by this man, and missed out on the best opportunity to save the Dark Phoenix Douluo as a result. The man who had just appeared was naturally none other than Tang Wolin. In reality, his helmet and visor had also been completed alongside his forearm guards, but they simply weren't as eye-catching in comparison. Furthermore, to Dark Bell, all incomplete suits of 3-word battle armor were worthless anyway. Humph. She harumphed coldly and wasted no time with words as she held the huge bell in her hand directly toward Tang Wuling. The shrill howls rang out once again, and the power of her domain swept toward Tang Wuling in an all-encompassing wave. The bell continued to expand while hurtling through the air, and the unsettling howls and sobs were extremely disturbing to listen to. Tang Wuling had actually arrived long ago, and he had constantly been surveying the entire battlefield. When the underground battle commenced, the battle above the ground had also begun to unfold. The Holy Spirit cult was determined to get their hands on these military resources, and they had made extensive preparations for this cause. After the military vehicles sank into the ground, over 100 mechas had immediately begun launching attacks from down below to keep the mecha battalion in the air at bay. Not only that, but a surface-to-air soul missile formation had risen up not far away, launching a series of missiles into the sky to prevent the fighter aircrafts at higher altitudes from approaching the scene. Tang Wuling had been completely astonished by this. He didn't think that the Holy Spirit cult would already be this brazen and reckless. To think that they could control a mecha squadron and set up a surface-to-air soul missile formation so close to the East Sea Legion base without being noticed, this was the ultimate slap to the face. If there had ever been any doubt before, it was now more than apparent that people within the Federation were colluding with the Holy Spirit cult. All of his friends had already joined the battle on the surface, and everyone was carrying a special identification chip given to them by the United Control Center so that they wouldn't be targeted by the ally mechas up above. They had finally lured so many Holy Spirit cult evil soul masters into a trap. How could they not go all out here? As the captain, Tang Wuling kept tabs on the entire situation, keeping an eye on the battle on the surface while also inspecting the underground battle with his spiritual power. Even though Zhang Xin was the only one fighting underground, he was a limit Douluo and one of the most powerful people in this world. With him present, Tang Wuling wasn't worried in the slightest about the leader of the evil soul masters getting away. Only after Dark Bell appeared did Tang Wuling quickly show himself, and his objective was very simple. He was here to buy time for Zhang Xin. Capturing someone alive was far more difficult than killing them, and Zhang Xin's objective was to capture the Dark Phoenix Douluo alive. The Holy Spirit cult was such a fearsome organization, not just because they had amassed astonishing power. What was an even greater contributor to how dangerous they were was the air of mystery that always surrounded them. Regardless of whether it was the Shrek Academy of the past or the Tang sect of the present, none of them had any useful information about the Holy Spirit cult. The unknown enemies in the shadows were always the most troublesome ones to deal with. If they could get some information out of the Dark Phoenix Douluo, who was one of the Holy Spirit cult's 4 heavenly monarchs, that would undoubtedly be immensely helpful to combating the cult in the future. The dark green wave continued to expand, and the terrifying aura of a top-tier hyper Douluo made the air around him twist and warp violently. This Dark Bell certainly hadn't stumbled into her position as one of the 4 heavenly monarchs by sheer luck. Even though Tang Wuling had been making rapid progress of late, there was still quite a large power disparity between him and the top-tier powerful beings of this world. In the face of the oncoming bell, he suddenly yelled, "Lena!" Dark Bell faltered momentarily upon hearing this, and her control over her bell was compromised for an instant as a result. Right at this moment, Tang Wuling swept his right hand violently through the air, sending a burst of dazzling golden light surging forth. Countless streaks of bluish golden light converged around the burst of golden light, and a thunderous dragon's roar erupted alongside overwhelmingly powerful blood essence fluctuations. At the same time, a dull yet powerful heartbeat also rang out. Boom! A resounding boom erupted within the entire underground world, and a bright light radiated from all of the rooms on the surface of the dark green bell. However, it was still forced back and trembled slightly as it returned to the air above Dark Bell's head. This was Tang Wuling's blood soul fusion skill. Blue Emperor Dragon shocks the heavens. Who are you? Compared to the shock of having her bell forced back by Tang Wuling, she was more astonished that he had called out her name. Tang Wuling's aura was as heavy as a mountain as he looked on at Dark Bell from afar. In terms of cultivation rank, he was naturally far inferior to his opponent, but at the same time, he certainly wasn't an ordinary soul sage. He had mastered a portion of the body sex congenital secret method, and that, combined with his powerful Golden Dragon King bloodline and blood soul fusion skills, closed the power gap between the two of them significantly. On top of that, his immense blood essence fluctuations also had a suppressive effect on evil soul masters. Am I right to call you Lena? Tang Wuling asked in an indifferent voice. He was in no hurry to unleash another attack. He knew that he couldn't defeat his opponent, so his objective was merely to stall for time. Indeed, this Dark Bell was none other than that female student that he had encountered after reaching the Sky CC train station. Compared to Lena's astonishment at Tang Wuling calling out her name, Tang Wuling had been even more stunned when he had first caught sight of her. Only now did he realize that the schoolgirl he had encountered at the train station was far from what she appeared to be on the surface. He, Dark Bell giggled. I see who you are. You changed your voice, but your aura still strikes me with a sense of familiarity. Let me guess, you're that kid from the train station, right? You even posed as my upperclassman. How sly of you. By the way, my real name isn't Lena, it's Narnali. Of course, you can also call me Little Bell. Chapter 1234. Even as she was speaking, she was constantly preparing her attack, having been disrupted by Tang Wuling. Her attempt to free the Dark Phoenix Douluo from the amorous one is left to rue what could have been domain had been thwarted. If Zhang Xin were to successfully capture the Dark Phoenix Douluo, she would be beyond saving, and on top of that, it would most likely become quite difficult even for Narnali herself to escape. A repugnant feeling welled up in Tang Wuling's heart. This Narnali was clearly an old monster who was at least old enough to be his grandmother, yet she was still acting like a bubbly and energetic little girl. Brilliant light erupted from her dark green bell, and Tang Wuling could indistinctly make out the glow of a soul ring from within the dense mist rising up from Narnali's body. Immediately thereafter, a crisp tinkling sound rang out from the bell above her head. Tinkle. Tinkle. Upon hearing this sound, Tang Wuling was struck by the feeling that he had been plunged into a dark green world. Countless dark green needles were piercing into his mind in a frenzy in an attempt to destroy him on a spiritual level. This was the first time that he had faced someone with a soundwave type martial soul, and to further compound his woes, she was also one of the most powerful hyper Douluo on the continent. Even though he had already thoroughly prepared himself, he still couldn't help but loose a muffled groan, and he quickly felt blood beginning to flow out of his orifices. What was even more alarming was that a relentless string of cracks had run out from his golden dragon body in the face of the soundwave attack. It was as if his body and even the space around him were rapidly being shattered. What a powerful opponent. Was this the power of a hyper Douluo? His heart rate climbed, and his dragon core and soul core also began to beat more violently to provide him with an enormous supply of energy. At the same time, he took one deep breath after another, and his golden dragon king bloodline began to fluctuate more violently at his behest. Roar. All of a sudden, Tang Wuling let loose a thunderous roar, and countless bluish golden blue silver emperor vines erupted from his body. These vines intertwined to form a dragon's head in midair, and it lashed out alongside his golden dragon king bloodline aura, dragon's might, and dragon's repulse. The deafening dragon's roar clashed with the terrifying chimes of the bell, and Tang Wuling could feel his blood essence and soul power trembling violently. However, the effects that the sound waves had on his body had thankfully been nullified. Narnali was quite taken aback by this. When she had first met Tang Wuling, she had sensed that his soul power fluctuations were at around the soul sage level. The only thing remarkable about him was that his blood essence fluctuations were far more powerful than the average soul sage, but he was still just a soul sage, after all, so she thought that he would be an opponent she could easily brush aside. She wasn't the most powerful of the 4 heavenly monarchs, but her abilities were the most unpredictable. The special nature of her soundwave martial soul also granted her the most destructive power among the 4 heavenly monarchs. She hadn't held back at all in that last soundwave attack, which she had unleashed through her soul skill, yet much to her surprise, Tang Wuling had managed to withstand it. Furthermore, the thunderous dragon's roar had even impacted her own blood essence, striking her with a sense of unease. With such a massive power gap between the two of them, Narnali was truly astonished and perplexed by this turn of events. Right at this moment, Tang Wuling sprang into action. He abruptly stomped his left foot onto the ground, drawing upon his golden dragon rod to enhance his aura, and his body shot forth like a speeding arrow toward Narnali. As he hurtled through the air, his blood essence contracted, and his golden dragon body returned to normal. At the same time, he activated his golden dragon tyrant body, making his scales take on a mirror-like appearance, and the spear projection from his golden dragon spear expanded drastically. Through the use of his blue emperor golden dragon takes flight, he reached Narnali virtually in the blink of an eye, and at the same time, a string of dragon's roars rang out as he instantly unleashed his violent golden dragon domain. On top of that, he also adopted his martial soul true body form, thereby transforming him into a giant golden dragon that was over 10 meters in length. In the face of this hyper Douluo, he wasn't holding back in the slightest and unleashed all of his abilities at once. This was what set the students of Shrek Academy apart from the rest of the Soul Master world. If a normal soul sage had been in Tang Wuling's shoes, there was no way that they would be able to stack so many abilities on top of one another. Yet Tang Wuling had accomplished this. With the ultra-powerful physical constitution bestowed upon him by his golden dragon king bloodline, he was able to withstand the negative side effects from receiving so many enhancements at once. You're like a suicidal moth diving into a flame. Na Nali harumphed coldly as she raised her right hand and snapped her fingers. On this occasion, as opposed to the chime of a bell, the deafening boom of a giant gong being struck rang out. Layer upon layer of sound waves surged forth to crash into Tang Wulin's golden dragon true body, and one could clearly see that his martial soul true body was being gradually stripped away and destroyed by the sound waves. However, Tang Wulin was like a giant dragon that had escaped from its cage, unleashing a thunderous roar of defiance and reaching Na Nali in a flash. The biggest mistake that Na Nali had made was that she had underestimated Tang Wulin. However, any hyper Douluo would most likely fall prey to the same error in the face of a soul sage level opponent. Never did she think that Tang Wulin would be able to stack his blue silver emperor, golden dragon king bloodline, golden dragon spear, golden dragon body, golden dragon tyrant body, and violent golden dragon domain on top of one another to unleash such a devastating attack. Prior to this, Tang Wulin had faced limit Douluo in battle before, so he had already formulated some judgment about her power level. A very large part of Na Nali's sound wave attacks targeted her opponent on a spiritual level, and in her eyes, there was no way that Tang Wulin would be able to withstand her attacks. After all, how much spiritual power could a soul sage possibly possess? She didn't even consider for a single split second that Tang Wulin could have already reached the spirit domain realm and was only one step away from mastering a spiritual domain. It was exactly due to this series of errors that Tang Wulin was allowed to close down the distance between the two of them. How could this be? This was the first thought that sprang into Na Nali's mind at the sight of the expanding giant dragon's head in her field of view. However, she was still one of the most powerful hyper Douluo, after all, so despite her astonishment, she still managed to react very quickly. Her body swayed, and the bell above her head abruptly expanded before completely encapsulating her body. At the same time, another tinkling chime rang out. This was her dark bell true body. In a one-on-one battle, Tang Wulin could already be quite proud of himself for forcing a hyper Douluo to adopt their martial soul true body form. Virtually substantial sound waves erupted forth as a layer of dense dark green light that clashed with Tang Wulin's golden dragon true body. In the end, the green light crumbled, yet Tang Wulin was also sent flying. There was still a fundamental disparity between their cultivation ranks. After all, Tang Wulin's blood essence circulated within his body, and his dragon core contracted violently to expel even more powerful blood essence. At this moment, Tang Wulin's incredible defensive prowess really shone through. His blood essence was churning within his body from being sent flying by Na Nali's attack, but he was the one who had taken the initiative, and Na Nali had still reacted slightly too slow in that instant, thereby preventing her from being able to unleash her full power. As such, Tang Wulin didn't sustain any serious injuries from that clash. By the time he steadied himself, he had already reverted back to his human form. His right arm then abruptly swelled in size, and he transferred his golden dragon spear into his left hand as he roared, "Come, my blade!" A burst of dazzling golden light abruptly descended through the air like lightning, and an aura of purest might immediately erupted from Tang Wulin's body. His dragon's might swelled in power by over tenfold, and a huge nine-colored projection appeared behind him before fading in a flash. His entire body seemed to have expanded, and it was as if he had completely fused with the nine-colored projection that had appeared behind him. He slashed the dragon-slaying saber through the air, unleashing a golden saber projection while countless dragons' roars rang out from all directions, completely drowning out the chimes of the bell. In the next instant, the golden saber projection struck the massive bell. From the instant he had unleashed Blue Emperor Golden Dragon takes flight to the moment that he had slashed the dragon-slaying saber through the air, only around 2 seconds had passed. Everything had progressed according to Tang Wulin's plan. He wasn't naive enough to think that his all-out assault would be enough to hurt a hyper Douluo, so this was his true trump card. After Sima Jinkai had discovered himself through the assistance he received from Tang Wulin's golden dragon spear, the two of them had forged a certain spiritual connection. Tang Wulin was naturally aware that there was no way he could hold back Na Nali on his own for 10 minutes, so he had already contacted Sima Jinkai in advance. At this moment, he had finally arrived on the scene, and the two of them immediately unleashed their soul fusion skill to unleash this unprecedentedly fearsome attack. Saber God Douluo was a title Douluo who was powerful enough to hold his own even against the average hyper Douluo, and the immense offensive power of his soul fusion skill with Tang Wulin was enough to contend with Na Nali. On top of that, Na Nali possessed a soundwave type martial soul, so close quarters combat was far from her forte, yet she had made the grave error of allowing Tang Wulin to close down the distance between them, thereby placing herself at a severe disadvantage. Clang. Chapter 1235. The dragon-slaying saber struck the huge bell in a vicious manner, and the saber was repelled in the end, but the dark green bell instantly took on a nine-colored hue. At the same time, a prominent crack had appeared on its surface, and nine-colored lights was rapidly expanding from within the crack. Na Nali let loose a howl of agony, and the bell abruptly shrank before fleeing into the darkness as a streak of dark green light, leaving the dark phoenix Douluo to fend for herself. Tang Wulin drifted down onto the ground while holding the dragon-slaying saber before throwing up a mouthful of blood. Light flashed, and the dragon-slaying saber reverted back into Sima Jinkai, who immediately reached out to support Tang Wulin. "Are you all right, master?" Tang Wulin shook his head in response. "I'm fine." Those sound wave attacks sure were powerful, though. Indeed, if a normal soul sage had been in his shoes, those devastating sound waves would have been enough to destroy their target both physically and spiritually. Zhang Xin was controlling his own domain while keeping an eye on Tang Wulin's battle, and he nodded in approval at the sight that he was greeted by. Tang Wulin had truly grown up. With his friends by his side, they were already powerful enough to face the truly powerful beings of the Soul Master world. If it weren't for the fact that his suit of free-word battle armor was far from complete, he most likely would have been able to hold off Na Nali for a very long time even without having to resort to this soul fusion skill. What was even more important was that his rate of development was far too rapid. During the short time that they had spent in Spicy City, Zhang Xin could sense noticeable changes in Tang Wulin even if they were only apart for a few days. After cultivating for so many years, he had well and truly entered the fast lane when it came to his progression. At this rate, he would definitely become a title Douluo within the next few years, and by then, he would truly be worthy of his titles as the Sea God's Pavilion Master and Tang Sect Master. Tang Wulin took a deep breath while releasing his spiritual power into the distance in case Na Nali were to return. His internal organs had been somewhat damaged from the soundwave attacks, but they had already mostly recovered during this brief period of rest. In terms of self-regenerative ability, he was already comparable to his senior disciple brother, Araheng. Even though he hadn't completely mastered the congenital secret method yet, his Golden Dragon King bloodline combined with a portion of the congenital secret method he had mastered already culminated to form a very terrifying product. Sima Jinkai was right beside him, and he couldn't help but be stunned as he looked at Tang Wulin. Through their spiritual connection, he could sense just how quickly Tang Wulin was recovering from his internal injuries. Meanwhile, Zhang Xin had finally controlled the Dark Phoenix Douluo, and she had fallen completely unconscious, lying limply in Zhang Xin's arms. "Now that we've captured her, we should have sufficient proof to support our case," Zhang Xin said with a faint smile. This was the first time that the Tang Sect had seized the upper hand against the Holy Spirit cult ever since the cult had resurfaced. The trap was a success. An entire division of mechas had already converged upon this place, both in the air and on the ground, so there was no way that any of the evil soul masters would be able to escape. Zhang Xin took the Dark Phoenix Douluo away, while Tang Wulin and the Blood Dragon squad communicated with the personnel deployed to the scene by the United Control Center. However, all of them were quickly disappointed by what they saw. As opposed to capturing living evil soul masters, they were greeted by the sight of one dead evil soul master after another, all of which had coughed up mouthfuls of black blood and had somehow managed to commit suicide. A total of over 400 evil soul masters were captured in the end, but all of them were dead. There was an extremely foul and toxic stench permeating through the area, and the military could only seal off this place while biochemistry experts arrived on the scene to address the situation. Meanwhile, Tang Wulin had already appeared before Boundless Douluo Chenzinji again. Dark Phoenix. Dark Bell. Chenzinji appraised Tang Wulin with an intent gaze. He naturally hadn't participated directly in this operation. As the Battle God Hallmaster and the commander of the United Fleet, his duty was to oversee everything on a broad level. "We were able to verify the identities of over 400 evil soul masters, but do you have evidence that they were behind the attack?" Chenzinji asked. Tang Wulin was stumped by this question. Wasn't it obvious? If the Holy Spirit cult hadn't been plotting something, why would so many of their evil soul masters, including even 2 hyper Douluo, have appeared here at once? Both of the heavenly monarchs have gotten away, and the other evil soul masters have all committed suicide. What evidence do you have to link them to the attack? Chenzinji asked in an abrasive manner. Tang Wulin quickly regained his composure and asked, "Are you insisting on starting this war? I don't have any concrete evidence, and if you still insist on pushing your agenda, I'm powerless to stop you. I've done everything in my power. The rest will be down to your judgment and decision." A rare smile appeared on Chenzinji's perpetually serious face. Tang Wulin was even more exceptional and steadfast than he had imagined, and he couldn't help but be envious of Jiang Wanyun for unearthing such an outstanding successor. "Come to the Battle God Hall." Chen Xinji invited with a smile. Tang Wuling had developed far greater mental fortitude than his peers through all of the hardships he had endured, but he was still left feeling rather speechless by Chen Xinji's unpredictable and erratic way of conversation. Come to our battle god hall, and you'll immediately become one of the main candidates to become one of our 18 battle gods. There are still 2 vacant spots among the 18 battle gods. As long as you can become a title Douluo within the next 5 years, you'll be the successor to my title as battle god hall master. I'll be retiring in 15 years at most, so you won't have to wait long. Chen Xinji continued as a slightly jaded look appeared on his face. Tang Wuling's lips twitched slightly upon hearing this. Your Majesty, we've only just met. Should you really be giving me such an important offer? Chen Xinji replied in a calm manner. There are some people whom I've known all my life, but they're still just acquaintances in my eyes. I trust in my judgment, and I know that I've found a worthy successor in you. You should be aware of the battle god hall's influence in the federal military, and I can tell that you wish to build up some influence in the military. What could help you more in achieving this goal than to become the battle god hall master? It was undoubtedly the case that Chen Xinji was very overbearing, almost suffocatingly so, but the conditions he was offering were also very alluring. Tang Wuling believed that if he were to accept this offer, Chen Xinji would definitely nurture him to the best of his abilities. Thank you for thinking so highly of me, Your Majesty, but I still have things that I need to do, and the Blood God Legion is still in need of my services. He couldn't tell Chen Xinji that he was already the Tang Sect Master and Shrek Academy's Sea God's Pavilion Master, so he could only use the Blood God Legion as a shield. If he were to tell the truth, Chen Xinji would most likely fly into a thunderous rage, thinking Tang Wuling was fooling around with him. Chen Xinji seemed to have anticipated this response from Tang Wuling in advance, and a faint smile appeared on his face as he said, "All right, you can go now." Tang Wuling's brows furrowed slightly. He simply couldn't keep up this wily old fox. After a brief moment of contemplation, he extended a military salute before turning to leave. He knew that with Chen Xinji's personality, there was no way that he would be convinced of anything that he didn't approve of, so Tang Wuling didn't try to press his case any further. As for why he hadn't told Chen Xinji about the capture of the Dark Phoenix Douluo, that was because she was more important to the Tang Sect than to the military. If they were to hand her over to the military, the members of the military who were colluding with the Holy Spirit cult could potentially find a way to release her, so it was best to keep them in the dark. Hold on. Chen Xinji called out just as Tang Wuling was about to exit his office. Do you have some other instructions, Your Majesty? Tang Wuling asked as he turned around. Chen Xinji flicked his wrist, and a piece of paper flew toward Tang Wuling like a sharp blade. Tang Wuling raised a hand to catch the piece of paper to discover that there was a long string of numbers written on it. That's my number. If you wish to consider my offer someday, you can call me at any time. Give me your number as well. Chapter 1236. Thus, Tang Wuling left his sole communication number with Chen Xinji before departing. Chen Xinji looked on at his departing figure, and a faint smile appeared on his face. This is certainly no ordinary kid. Looks like I'll have to get the military to approve of my proposal even earlier now. He pulled out his sole communicator as he spoke before dialing a number. It's Chen Xinji. I'm calling regarding the 6th clause of my proposal. The Blood God Legion is given so much financial support by the military every year, so why can't they be officially included as part of the military? At the very least, I would like to strongly reiterate my suggestion for members of their legion to engage in periodic exchanges with members of our Sea God Legion. Of course, only the elite of the elite serve at the Blood God Legion, so those sent to their legion from our Sea God Legion as part of the exchange program will also be the best that we have to offer. Tang Wuling returned directly to the Tang Sect. Even though they had successfully dealt a heavy blow to the Holy Spirit cult today, they still hadn't completed their objective. Just what was that sly old Chen Xinji thinking? Was war really imminent? Their successful operation against the Holy Spirit cult had already proven beyond a reasonable doubt that the Holy Spirit cult had been plotting something in Spicy City. So many powerful beings from the Holy Spirit cult had been sent here, including even 2 of their heavenly monarchs, so it would simply be unreasonable to assume that they had nothing to do with the recent attack. As such, everyone had already returned. They were all living in the same hotel, and of course, this was a hotel that belonged to the Tang Sect. Zhang Xin was absent, so he was most likely taking care of the matters surrounding the Dark Phoenix Douluo. Meanwhile, Yizinglan and Yuan and Yui had resumed working on everyone's suits of 3-word battle. What's the situation like, boss? She asked. He was the only one with Tang Wuling as everyone else had gone back to rest or were helping Yuan and Yui and Yizinglan in their battle armor construction. This was a splendid victory, and it was also their first victory against the Holy Spirit cult. Tang Wuling replied. The military refrained from giving a definite verdict, citing insufficient evidence, so we can only continue to wait and observe. This still isn't enough evidence for them. Shishi's voice immediately sprang up a few octaves. Tang Wuling shot a glance at him. Quiet down. Are you afraid that people won't be able to hear you? The military has always been in support of going to war, and it's virtually impossible that no one from the military has participated, either directly or indirectly, in this attack. As the representative of the Eagle faction and one of the most powerful figures in the military, his verdict will be extremely important. The fact that he's willfully turning a blind eye to this irrefutable evidence suggests that a war really is imminent, not necessarily. A voice suddenly sounded from outside, and Zhang Xin opened the door before striding into the room. Only a powerful limit Douluo like him would be able to overhear their conversation, even after Tang Wuling had used his soul power to seal off the room. Oh, what do you think, then, Your Majesty? Tang Wuling asked. Zhang Xin smiled and said, that old geezer, Chen Xinji, is only putting on an act. He knows full well who was behind this attack, and he doesn't hate the Holy Spirit cult any less than we do. Tang Wuling faltered slightly upon hearing this. Does the boundless ocean Douluo also have a vendetta against the Holy Spirit cult? Zhang Xin nodded in response. Chen Xinji has never married in his life as he once fell in love with a woman during his younger days. The 2 of them entered a relationship, but it didn't work out in the end due to some misunderstandings, and the fact that both of them were too stubborn and unyielding. However, from his decision not to marry, one can tell that he still hasn't forgotten her, and that woman never married, either. Despite this, they were both too stubborn and prideful to resolve their differences, and in the end, the woman perished at the hands of the Holy Spirit cult. At the very least, that's what he thinks to be the case, so how could he not hate the Holy Spirit cult? Tang Wuling was quite surprised to hear this. Is that so? This boundless ocean Douluo is clearly very old, so his lover from back then should also be quite old. Has their relationship not been diluted? Zhang Xin replied. Love is something you never forget, especially when one falls in love at a young age, and both of them are the type of people who will only love a single person in their lives. When his lover passed away, Chen Xinji had flown into a thunderous rage and vowed to destroy the Holy Spirit cult. This is not known to many people, but someone from our Tang Sect just so happened to hear about it. Following the event, he had even visited the original site of Shrek City to mourn his lover's passing. Tang Wuling said, but from our communication today, he seems to still be in support of a war, and this doesn't conflict with his hatred of the Holy Spirit cult. Perhaps we should hand the Dark Phoenix Douluo over to him? Zhang Xin shook his head in response. No. The Dark Phoenix Douluo is going to be very important to us, more specifically, for our trip to the other 2 continents, so we can't hand her over to him. We've already proven that powerful members of the Holy Spirit cult had infiltrated Sky Sea City en masse, so what we have to do now is to convince Chen Xinji. A wry smile appeared on Tang Wuling's face. That's probably going to be very difficult. The boundless ocean Douluo is a very stubborn man. Zhang Xin nodded in response. Indeed, Chen Xinji is a dogmatic and conceited old fart. Neither of us will be able to convince him, but someone can, and you have to convince that person to go and see Chen Xinji. A puzzled look appeared on Tang Wuling's face. Who are you referring to? The smile on Zhang Xin's eyes widened as he replied. I'm naturally referring to his deceased lover. She's the only one who can convince him. A series of thoughts flashed through Tang Wuling's mind, and a thought quickly occurred to him, upon which his mouth gaped open in shock. You don't mean the one you're thinking of is exactly the person I'm referring to. As such, you need to make a trip back. I'm sure it won't be a difficult task for you to leave Sky Sea City despite the city's current state of lockdown. Make sure to get her here as quickly as possible. The Dark Phoenix Douluo is going to be very useful to me, and perhaps I'll have some good news for you when you come back. A wry smile appeared on Tang Wuling's face. That's a very tall order. Is there no other way? Zhang Xin shrugged in response. Do you think I would have told you something like this if there were an alternative? I have to go into hiding after this. Otherwise, that lover of Chen Xinji's is going to be out for my blood. Do you think you're the only one facing a lot of pressure? I'm also going to be facing a lot of heat after this. What are you 2 talking about, Your Majesty? Why can't I understand what you're saying? She looked at Tang Wuling and Zhang Xin with an indignant expression. He could understand the story that Zhang Xin had told, but after that, the conversation took a completely inexplicable turn to him. Who was this person that Tang Wuling and Zhang Xin had been referring to? Tang Wuling chuckled. Do you not have a brain? Think about it. This is someone who's in the same generation as the boundless ocean Douluo, and is outstanding enough for mutual attraction to appear between them. She also died recently at the hands of the Holy Spirit cult, but we know her, and we know that she's still alive. Is that still not enough to clue you in? She wasn't an idiot, and his jaw also quickly dropped to the ground. My God. No way. Is that really true? This is a secret among secrets. Your Majesty, which one is more powerful between you and her? How about you make this trip in Wuling instead? Zhang Xin asked with a smile. She hurriedly shook his head vigorously in response. No, thanks. I don't have what it takes. Only our Sea God's Pavilion Master can pull off something like this. Then shut your trap. 2 hours later, Tang Wuling had gotten on a soul train back to Heaven Dou City. He had disguised himself as a middle-aged man, and he was traveling alone to attract the least attention possible. Even now, he was still stunned by this revelation. It was undoubtedly the case that Chen Xinji's love story was a secret of the past, and the story had probably taken place over a century ago. This meant that even though the boundless ocean Douluo appeared to be a middle-aged man, he had to be around 200 years old. It was truly remarkable to think about a love story that had taken place over 100 years ago. What about the soul masters of 1,000 years ago, or even 10,000 years ago? Humans had a traceable history of around 30,000 years on the Douluo continent. This was an extremely lengthy process, and during this time, technology had constantly advanced. As the occupation of soul master emerged, people learned to use their innate martial souls to combat the soul beasts, which were the rulers of the continent at the time. Gradually, the power balance shifted, and humans became the masters of this continent. At present, soul beasts were teetering on the precipice of extinction, and the entire Douluo star was also suffering from resource shortages. During these past 30,000 years, far too many things had happened in the human race. The most important reason behind the widespread support that the federal military was receiving was that the future they described was a reliable and feasible one. They were going to attain more resources, then go into space exploration to find a new home for the human race. After all, as the resources on the Douluo star continued to be depleted, even the planar ruler was becoming more feeble. If things were to continue in this fashion, the vitality of the entire planet would most likely be snuffed out eventually. Chapter 1237. However, why didn't the members of the general public who supported the military consider how difficult it was going to be to find another habitable planet? No one knew what the world outside the Douluo star was like. If they couldn't find a habitable planet in 100 years, then they could afford to stretch the search to 200 years. But what if they continued to fail in that endeavor? What could they do? Give up? Tang Wuling's brows furrowed involuntarily as he followed this train of thought. He could clearly sense the seed of life's yearning for life force energy. If the seed of life had sufficient life force energy to support the ancient golden tree, perhaps Shrek Academy could have avoided destruction altogether. Humans were constantly plundering the planet's resources to satisfy their own wants and needs, and to create terrifying weapons. Eventually, this was going to lead to humanity destroying itself. Tang Wuling found the Dove faction's ideologies to be easier to accept. They championed population control, reductions in the exploitation of the planet's resources, environmental conservation, and conserving more resources for future generations. Technological advancement was a must, but this rate of development was definitely not sustainable. Technology on the Douluo star had been advancing far too quickly, and that would inevitably result in the expenditure of a vast amount of resources. Without resources, technology wouldn't be able to continue to advance, and that was what had resulted in this current situation, where war was all but inevitable. During a conversation by a soul communicator, Moland had once told Tang Wuling that the Dove faction had suggested a plan in Parliament that involved exchanging technical information with the other two empires for resources. But this plan was turned down by the Parliament. In the eyes of the majority, particularly from the perspective of the Eagle faction, they deemed it unnecessary to engage in an exchange when they could take what they wanted by force using their superior weaponry. Weren't these exchanges only going to strengthen the opposition? This viewpoint received majority support, both in the federal parliament and among the general public. After all, in the eyes of the people, the Douluo continent was too powerful for the other two continents to contend with, and the war was only going to take place on foreign soil, so it had nothing to do with them. Moland's counter-argument to this was that the inhabitants of the other two continents were humans, just like those on the Douluo continent, and this viewpoint resonated greatly with Tang Wuling. Perhaps the absence of his parents from a young age gave him a stronger yearning for familial bonds, and that made him quite sensitive in this area. How terrifying would it be for someone to lose all of their loved ones? If this war were to eventuate, it was undoubtedly the case that countless people were going to be stripped of their loved ones. The soul train had already accelerated to full speed, and as Tang Wuling looked out at the rapidly passing scenery outside the window, he was suddenly struck by a hint of amusement. Perhaps it was due to his recent drastic change in status that had him worrying about the state of the entire world. In reality, his most important objective for making this trip to the other two continents was to find his parents. A surge of warmth flowed through his heart at the thought of his parents. Even though his parents had disappeared when he was at a very young age, it was only through his father's guidance and his mother's kindness that he went on to become the resolute young man he currently was. It was exactly due to their abduction that he had more motivation to cultivate and learn, to constantly improve himself in the hope of being able to rescue his parents someday. And now, he had finally gained the power to begin taking steps toward that objective. He closed his eyes to rest, and his mysterious heaven method soul power circulated naturally throughout his body. Even though his cultivation speed had improved dramatically, Tang Wuling had become even more averse to slacking off. During this recent period of time, he had integrated all of his abilities into a cohesive package, and he was confident that he would be able to progress to the soul Douluo level without encountering any bottleneck. After reaching that level, it was about time that he considered breaking his 12th Golden Dragon King seal. According to the past trend, after breaking the 12th seal, he would receive a new Golden Dragon King ability, and every such ability that he attained had enhanced his powers drastically. Is this seat taken? A pleasant voice suddenly sounded beside Tang Wuling, and he reflexively raised his head as alarm bells began to ring in his heart. Prior to this voice sounding beside him, he had completely failed to sense that someone was approaching him. With his powers, this was virtually impossible even if he had been in deep thought. This could only mean one thing. The person who had approached him was quite a powerful being in their own right. Nali was still wearing the same school uniform as the one she had worn during their first meeting, and she sat down beside Tang Wuling with a smile, looking as if she really were a student. Tang Wuling's heart immediately sank at the sight of her. He had already carefully disguised himself, to the extent that he had even altered his own figure and aura, so why had he still been discovered? Perhaps this was a coincidence. Surely that was too much of a stretch. Despite the tumultuous emotions in his heart, Tang Wuling managed to remain expressionless as he replied in a hoarse voice. Not at all. Hee, you have a really good poker face. Shouldn't you show me what you actually look like? I'm super curious. It's not good to always wear a disguise. She reached a hand toward Tang Wuling's face as she spoke. Just as Tang Wuling was about to stop her, she transmitted her voice to him as a warning. There are close to 2,000 passengers on this train. You'd better listen to me or none of you will live to see tomorrow. Tang Wuling remained still in the end and allowed Nali to place her hand on his face, but his heart had turned ice cold. He had no idea how she had seen through his disguise. Nali's palm seemed to possess magical powers, able to sweep away Tang Wuling's disguise in an instant to reveal his true appearance. Wow, you're so handsome. Nali couldn't help but exclaim as her eyes lit up at the sight of Tang Wuling's large eyes, long eyelashes, and handsome facial features. She sidled up closer against Tang Wuling before wrapping her arms around his arm and whispering into his ear in a seductive manner. Did you know that a really good-looking person automatically possesses the equivalent of a captivation domain ability? How about you let me eat you up? Tang Wuling remained silent. He was all alone here, and there was no way he could oppose Nali at such close quarters. Countless thoughts quickly flashed through his mind as he scrambled to find a way out of this situation. But much to his dismay, he discovered that he had no chance against someone who was so close in power to a limit Douluo. Furthermore, who knew just how many members of the Holy Spirit cult were on this train? Are you curious about how I found you? Your disguise technique is actually really good. If you want to ask, then go ahead, ask and I'll tell you. Nali encouraged with an innocent smile on her face. Tang Wuling's heart was filled with nothing but disgust at the sight of her. This was a heinous old old hag who was trying to pose as a schoolgirl, and it was truly abhorrent. He remained silent, and at the same time, he was preparing for the worst. Are you really not curious? I was planning to refuse to tell you if you had asked me. Now that you refuse to ask me, I'm going to force the answer on you. I actually left my soundwave vibrations on you during our last clash. This is my soundwave tracking ability, and those soundwave vibrations would have disappeared after a few more days. Without this, I really wouldn't have been able to see through your disguise. I didn't think you'd be leaving to go somewhere on your own so soon after our battle, so I immediately followed you here. Isn't it funny how fate works sometimes? Tang Wuling could only lament his own ill fortune. Indeed, fate really did work in some funny ways. Chapter 1238. Tang Wuling continued to remain silent as he knew that he was susceptible to falling under her influence if he were to respond. The only thing he could do now was to bide his time and search for an opportunity. Nanali smiled and continued. Are you not going to say anything? How about this? Let's play a game from now on. I'll ask questions, and you give me answers. For every question you refuse to answer, I'll kill someone on this train. Who do you think I should start with? She raised a hand to point at the surrounding passengers as she spoke, and her entrancing smile coupled with her beautiful features captivated many of the nearby male passengers. What's your name? A burst of gentle energy began to swirl around her fingertip. Blood Dragon. Tang Wuling had no choice but to speak. He couldn't just sit idly and watch as she engaged in senseless slaughter. I knew you weren't a mute. Blood Dragon. That's not your real name, is it? Tang Wuling replied in an indifferent voice. I have many names. Do you want me to make one up for you on the spot? Nanali continued. All right. Next question. Then, are you from the Tang sect? Yes. Tang Wuling replied in a clipped and concise manner. Nanali cocked her head to the side in a show of contemplation. I didn't think that the Tang sect would have such an exceptional disciple. You really do seem very young, which makes it all the more incredible. You must be a very important figure in the Tang sect, right? I was shocked that you were able to hurt me as a mere soul sage. By the way, that really hurt. You cracked my martial soul. How about you guess how much remaining power I have? You should give it a try. Maybe you can even beat me. Where's your friend that you used that soul fusion skill with? She raised her hand in a grand gesture as she spoke, and imitated Tang Wuling's voice. Come, my blade. You were so cool at the time. It's too bad that you don't have your blade with you now. I can't believe that Idiot Phoenix was captured. Don't worry, I couldn't bear to hurt you. I'm just going to exchange you for that Idiot Phoenix. Speaking of her, I don't like her, either. She looks pretty, but she's even more evil than I am. I only collect some vengeful spirits here and there, but she directly extracts the soul out of living people's bodies and turns them into vengeful spirits or collects them to be tortured. She's really abhorrent. I'm much better than her. I only like the invisible sound waves that vengeful spirits emit. Am I not the kindest person in the entire Holy Spirit cult? Tang Wuling chuckled coldly in response. That's such a sly smile, but you're still so handsome. I really have fallen for you. How about you become my boyfriend? I'm not even old. I'm only 37 this year. I'm sure you're aware that age becomes largely inconsequential when soul masters reach a certain level. We'll both live until we're over 200 anyway, so what's the difference between 37 and 20-something? If you become my boyfriend, you can do whatever you want to me. She lowered her head in a shy manner as she spoke, and Tang Wuling glanced down at her, upon which he was immediately struck by a sense of entrancement. Right at this moment, a burst of refreshing coolness spread through his body from his silver dragon scale pendant, snapping him out of his instant of infatuation. Nanali raised her head in a slightly surprised manner. She had clearly noticed the shift in Tang Wuling's mental state and was quite stunned by this. Her seduction ability had elements of her domain intermingled into it, yet he was able to resist her. I'm becoming more and more convinced that you're an exceptional talent in your Tang sect. It's a good thing that I encountered you now. Otherwise, given 10 more years, I may not be able to control you. I'm really glad to have met you now. She tightened her arms around Tang Wuling's arm as she spoke while pressing herself against his chest. Tang Wuling was also quite shocked by what he had heard. If this Nanali really were only 37 years old, then that would simply be extraordinary. A 37-year-old rank 98 hyper Douluo was truly an outstanding talent in the Soulmaster world. He had already heard from Zhang Shen that among the higher-ups of the Holy Spirit cult, the 4 heavenly monarchs were ranked below the sovereign and 2 emperors. Didn't that mean that there were at least 3 beings in the Holy Spirit cult who were more powerful than her? They could even all be limit Douluo. They were going to use him to exchange for the Dark Phoenix Douluo. She was most likely telling the truth here. He did appear to be quite important, but compared to the Dark Phoenix Douluo, who was already a hyper Douluo, he still paled in significance. Thus, he temporarily set aside the thought of turning on Nanali regardless of the consequences. This was not the time to be lamenting his ill fortune or to be feeling sorry for himself. Instead, he had to find a way to escape or to minimize the harm resulting from this exchange. I don't like guys who don't talk. Let's have a chat. How did you join the Tang sect? She asked in a curious manner. Tang Wuling replied, my teacher introduced me to the sect. Who's your teacher? Nanali asked. Tang Wuling replied, I have many teachers. You wouldn't know the one I'm referring to even if I told you. Nanali pouted in a displeased manner. You're not being very interesting. I don't want to speak with you anymore. I'm injured and I need rest, so I'm taking a nap. She leaned her head on Tang Wuling's shoulder and closed her eyes as she spoke. From an outsider's perspective, they appeared to be a pair of lovers, and a very harmonious pair, at that. Soon, her breathing evened out, and Tang Wuling continued to look out the window as he brainstormed all types of ideas. Could he break out through the window? Nanali appeared to be holding onto his arm in a gesture of intimacy, but in reality, her palm was constantly adhered to just under Tang Wuling's ribs, and she could exert force at a moment's notice. With her powers, Tang Wuling would be sure to be severely wounded by her at such close quarters, so there was no way that he would be able to escape. Thus, the Soul train continued on toward Heaven Dou City. This was an express train service with no intermittent stops, so the journey was completed very quickly, and it only took just over 3 hours for them to arrive at Heaven Dou City. That was a really good nap. It's been a long time since I've slept so soundly. You made a really good pillow. Are we almost at the station? Lend me your shoulder again on the return trip. Nanali said in a provocative manner. Tang Wuling didn't say or do anything in response. All he could do now was wait for a suitable opportunity to arise. Only then would there be a chance that he could escape his current predicament. The train came to a steady halt, and Nanali held Tang Wuling's hand in an affectionate manner, dragging him over to the ticket station before buying a pair of return tickets. It seemed that she was just another law-abiding young woman, and if Tang Wuling didn't know better, he would have also fallen under that impression. Let's go back to Sky City. I really hate that amorous Douluo from your sect. I'm going to break that annoying domain of his sooner or later. People like him are reputed to be full of emotion. They're actually the most heartless ones. Nanali released Tang Wuling's hand before stretching lazily, showing off the gorgeous curves of her body as she did so. Let's go get something to eat, then return to Sky City. Traveling with a handsome man like you really is an enjoyable experience, Nanali said with a smile. Tang Wuling continued to remain silent and did whatever Nanali asked of him. There was no need to work her at a time like this, and he was also putting on this meek and obedient facade to lure her into a false sense of security. By the way, tell me about that soul fusion skill of yours. It's so powerful. What's the deal with that saber? I felt like, at the time, your friend turned into a saber for you to wield. It's the first time I've seen a soul fusion skill like that. Your powers were instantly elevated, and your aura was really terrifying. If it hadn't been for the fact that you're still lacking in power, I may not even have been able to get away. What was that saber technique? Tang Wuling offered no reply. Are you not going to respond? If not, I'm going to kill someone. Tang Wuling shot a glance at her. Of course not. I'm a kind-hearted and gentle girl. How could I possibly kill someone for no reason? I was only joking on the train. If you're not going to talk, then I'll give you a kiss as a punishment. She began to sidle up closer to Tang Wuling as she spoke, and the latter's brows furrowed involuntarily. Nanali could clearly see a strong sense of loathing in Tang Wuling's eyes, and her lips paused on Richie's cheek. Oi, do you hate me that much? I'm even more determined to kiss you now. She reached out with her right hand to grab toward Tang Wuling as she spoke. How vulgar. A frosty voice sounded right at this moment. Nanali was slightly alarmed by this voice, and she reflexively turned around. Meanwhile, Tang Wuling shuddered as if an electric current had jolted through his body, and he also turned toward the source of the voice. Chapter 1239. His expression instantly stiffened at the sight of this person. The woman standing before him was none other than the woman who was constantly on his mind. Dou Yuna was wearing a long white dress that complemented her silver hair and purple eyes to form an exquisitely beautiful package. Nanali was already very beautiful, but she couldn't hold a candle to Dou Yuna, just as how a wildflower would pale into insignificance in the face of a lily in full bloom. A hint of resentment flashed through Nanali's eyes. She absolutely detested women who were more beautiful than her, and this one even dared to provoke her. She didn't want to make a scene in such a large city, but the situation really did get to her. After a brief stunned stupor, Tang Wuling immediately realized the dangerous situation that Dou Yuna had unwittingly placed herself in, and he immediately grabbed onto Nanali's arm. You want to hear about my soul fusion skill, right? I'll tell you about it. The resentment in her eyes faded, and she turned back to Tang Wuling with a smile. Really? Why do I get the feeling that you know her? Are you trying to protect her? With her cunning and guile, she was able to glean many things through Tang Wuling's panicked reaction. Right at this moment, a man approached Dou Yuna with a smile. What's going on, Nana? Who are you talking about? This was a tall and broad young man who appeared to be around 27 to 28 years of age with his golden hair arranged in a neat manner. He also wore a set of white robes, but in contrast with Dou Yuna's white dress, his attire had golden patterns on it, which made it appear more lavish and prestigious. This young man was also extremely handsome. He appeared to be slightly less masculine compared to Tang Wuling, but his eyes were particularly bright, and there seemed to be something special within them. Oh, it's another handsome boy. He. Nanali's eyes lit up at the sight of the young man before she turned back to Tang Wuling with a smile, and said, I still like you better. You're more energetic and masculine. Looks like she's already got a boyfriend, so she doesn't seem to have anything to do with you. Dou Yuna replied in an indifferent manner. No one. She then turned and made her way over to the nearby waiting area before taking a seat. The young man followed her and didn't take so much as a single glance at Tang Wuling and Nanali. He had a smile on his face this entire time, but there was no way to conceal the superiority that was an integral part of his being. Tang Wuling appeared to be quite calm, but how could he possibly be actually as tranquil as he looked? Never did he think that he would encounter Dou Yuna at a time like this, and the young man with her also seemed to have quite a special relationship with her. Who was he? The aura he released was very powerful, so he was most likely a titled Douluo. It was quite remarkable to see such a young titled Douluo, considering that Dou Yuna was from the Spirit Pagoda. This young man was most likely from the same organization. These thoughts quickly raced through Tang Wuling's mind, but he didn't do anything. Compared to the possibility that he now had a new rival in love, Nanali was far more fearsome a prospect. He had to get this ticking time bomb away from Dou Yuna no matter what, even if doing so meant that he could be misunderstood by Dou Yuna. It was quite clear that Nanali had also sensed the white-robed young man's power, and there was an intrigued look in her eyes, but she didn't say anything about him. Her main objective was still to capture Tang Wuling. Tang Wuling appeared to only be a soul sage, but his powers were not inferior to those of the average titled Douluo, so she didn't want anything to distract her. In reality, it was just as she had said to Tang Wuling, she had been able to capture him purely by chance. Ignore those boring people, Nana. Why are you traveling to Spicy City? Are you really planning to take a trip to the Douluo continent? If so, I'd have to advise against that. That's a foreign continent, after all, and once the war begins, it's going to be quite dangerous over there. I think it's best if we stay at the headquarters. Your spiritual power has almost reached the spirit domain realm, right? Can you give me a chance after you make your breakthrough? The white-robed young man asked. Dou Yuna glanced at him and replied, we'll discuss that when the time comes. As for making a trip to the Douluo continent, I haven't made up my mind about that yet. I only want to go and visit Spicy City. I heard that there are 3 fleets gathered there, so it must be a very spectacular sight to behold. All right. The white-robed young man didn't force the issue any further and merely gave Dou Yuna a captivating smile before sitting in silence beside her. Tang Wuling had extremely good hearing, so he naturally overheard their conversation. She was going to Spicy City, and possibly the Douluo Empire? Why? Do you know her? Is they your little lover? Looks like you've got a rival in love. Nanali whispered into Tang Wuling's ear. She was clearly deriving gloating pleasure from this situation, but on a deeper level, a hint of coldness seemed to have crept into her voice. Tang Wuling glanced at her and remained silent. Nanali was too dangerous. He couldn't afford for Dou Yuna to have a run-in with her. As such, at a time like this, he could only give her the cold shoulder and pretend not to know her. There was still some time until the train back to Spicy City arrived, and there weren't many people on the platform. Tang Wuling, Dou Yuna, Nanali, and the white-robed young man were all extremely good-looking, so they naturally attracted a lot of attention from passers-by. Tang Wuling remained silent while Nanali maintained a smile on her face, and no one could tell what she was thinking. The white-robed young man also wore a warm smile on his face, giving him a graceful and refined appearance. In contrast, Dou Yuna's expression remained rather indifferent, quite similar to the expression that Tang Wuling currently wore. All 4 of them were wrapped up in their own thoughts, and they presented a collection of exceptional eye candy for all of the other people on the platform. Dou Yuna tucked a few stray strands of her long silver hair behind her ear, and a rather peculiar look suddenly appeared on her face. This was a very subtle change in expression that one would completely fail to notice unless they were paying very close attention to her. This was the slightest hint of a smile, and in the next instant, she abruptly sprang into action without any premonition. Her movements didn't appear to be very fast or jerky. Instead, she made quite a natural and graceful gesture, pressing a palm toward Tang Wuling seemingly in an absent-minded manner. This simple-looking gesture caused the space in front of her palm to collapse. It was as if the air had become a balloon, which was being compressed by her palm. On the other end, the air suddenly walked around Tang Wuling, and a burst of powerful force crashed toward his body. Everything had happened extremely abruptly, to the extent that both Nanali and the white-robed young man failed to react. Tang Wuling gave a muffled groan, and his body was sent flying as if it had been struck by some kind of powerful force. Nanali was quite alarmed by this sudden development, and she held onto Tang Wuling's hand with one of her hands while also pressing her other palm against the air to oppose the oncoming burst of force. A dull explosion rang out, and the shockwaves immediately surged through the surrounding area. In the next instant, Dou Yuna sprang up into the air, sweeping her right hand through the air to conjure up a massive fireball out of nowhere, then sent it flying directly toward Nanali. The scenes that unfolded next were quite astonishing, even to a being as powerful as Nanali. Following the emergence of the fireball was a ball of azure light that was constructed from fierce winds. After that, a rippling ball of water appeared, then a yellow ball of earth, and each ball of light flew through the air faster than the previous one. By the time they had flown 10 meters away from Dou Yuna, all of them had already fused together as one, forming a colorful yet extremely unstable massive ball of light that enshrouded Nanali's entire body. Even Nanali couldn't help but be astonished by the elemental power that Dou Yuna was able to muster up in such a short time. At the very least, there was no one that she knew of that could accomplish this. Chapter 1240. Ding. A dark green bell appeared out of thin air and let loose a crisp chime, upon which the 4-colored ball of light abruptly faltered before exploding to unleash a terrifying energy storm. At the same time, a dark green light barrier appeared in front of Nanali, shielding her and Tang Wuling from the oncoming energy blasts. In the instant after Dou Yuna unleashed those 4 balls of light, she swept her right hand through the air, and her soul rings appeared around her, following which a thin and long elemental staff appeared in her grasp. She drew a circle with the staff in the air, conjuring up a silver ring of light. Nanali faltered slightly upon seeing this, and in the next instant, an identical silver ring had appeared beneath her feet. Silver light flashed, and before she had a chance to resist, she found herself standing right in front of Dou Yuna. This was spatial teleportation, and she had used it on an enemy. Nanali was well and truly astonished. This woman's elemental control abilities were simply extraordinary. At her cultivation rank, even if she had been caught off guard, she shouldn't have been passively teleported so easily. Dou Yuna's movements were smooth and flowing like those of an artist. As soon as the silver ring of light was conjured up, she seemed to have already determined that Nanali wouldn't be able to escape her teleportation. She thrust her left hand toward the ring of light, and by the time Nanali was teleported to her, the former was greeted by the sight of a completely golden palm that was thrusting directly toward her. Light elements that were so dense that they were almost in a solid form erupted forth, and Nanali could only raise her arms to protect herself in the face of this abrupt turn of events. lips. In the instant that she was teleported to Douluo, the white-robed young man beside her also reacted to the situation, and 9 soul rings instantly emerged beneath his feet, consisting of 7 blacks and 2 reds. His third soul ring lit up, and a strange weapon instantly appeared in his hand, which he swept horizontally through the air. This was a halberd that resembled a long spear, except there was a crescent blade on each side of the tip of the weapon. With the activation of his soul skill, the halberd turned into a scorching white color, and as he swung it through the air, an enormous burst of suction force erupted from it. One of the crescent blades on the weapon instantly reached Nanali's neck, and everything had happened so quickly that Tangwulin and Nanali were left reeling by this turn of events. Who could have envisioned that Douluo would suddenly lash out in such an abrupt and devastating manner? Furthermore, she seemed to have great synergy and teamwork with the white-robed young man, who was also an extremely powerful titled Douluo in his own right, as exemplified by his exceptional soul ring configuration. Even compared to the soul rings of Nanali, he was only missing a 100,000-year-old soul ring. In the face of these sudden attacks, Nanali displayed her power as one of the 4 heavenly monarchs. She let loose a delicate harumph, sending sound waves piercing into the listener's mind, and the white-robed young man's attack clearly faltered for an instant as a result. Right at this moment, her palm clashed with Douluo's and a dull thump immediately rang out. Douluo's body swayed slightly, and countless bursts of dark green energy instantly surged toward her body amid shrill howls of anguish. In contrast, a layer of golden light had appeared over Nanali's body, and on the surface, it appeared that Nanali had seized the clear upper hand. However, she certainly wasn't enjoying herself. The extremely rich light elements from Douluo's palm had surged directly into her body through her palm before clashing violently with the dark energy inside her. Just as Nanali was steeling herself to repress her agony and take down Douluo, the elemental staff in Douluo's hand suddenly tapped onto the ground. A dull boom rang out, and a silver halo abruptly erupted outward with her body at its very center. The force of this attack caused Nanali to stumble slightly, and the halberd finally arrived in this instant. The attack from the halberd was imbued with immense force and unstoppable momentum. Nanali was far more powerful than the white-robed young man, but the offensive power from such a top-tier tool martial soul was simply far too tremendous. Taking this attack head-on definitely wouldn't be a good idea for her. As such, Nanali could only duck down while hurriedly darting backward in a wraith-like manner, drawing upon the power of Douluo's spatial elemental blast to aid herself in her retreat. How were these two so powerful? The white-robed young man was most likely already close to the hyper-Douluo level, but Nanali was more wary of Douluo as she found herself struggling to comprehend what Douluo's exact power level was. She only had 8 soul rings, consisting of 7 blacks and 1 red, but as a powerful being who was extremely close to the limit Douluo level, Nanali had extremely sharp senses, and all of her senses were telling her that this woman posed a far bigger threat than the halberd-wielding young man. Run! An extremely faint voice sounded beside Tangwulin's ears. At the same time, Douluo raised her elemental staff high up into the air. Water, fire, earth, wind, light, and spatial elements instantly manifested themselves in a physical form, conjuring up a vast expanse of 6-colored light that swirled around the beautiful gem on the tip of her staff. The 6-colored light formed a giant vortex, and a burst of extremely powerful suction force acted upon Nanali's body, quickly drawing her toward the vortex. At this moment, countless projections of the white-robed young man had also appeared, and they dispersed before converging toward a single target. It was as if he had suddenly been cloned thousands of times, and all of the projections seemed extremely realistic. This was an immensely powerful attack that even Tangwulin couldn't help but be in awe of. He tapped his foot onto the ground without any hesitation and instantly spread open his golden wings. He flapped his wings vigorously and almost instantly flew over 100 meters away, then rapidly fled from the train station. It wasn't that he didn't want to join forces with Douluo. With the white-robed young man's assistance, there was a chance that they could even detain Nanali. However, he had absolute trust in Douluo. She had told him to run, so she naturally had her reasons. Furthermore, Douluo had clearly become far more powerful than before, and with the white-robed young man's assistance, there was no way that Nanali would be able to defeat them. Nanali could sense that Tangwulin was fleeing the scene, and she immediately flew into a thunderous rage. She let loose a sharp cry, and her dark bell instantly expanded while her pupils turned into a dark green color. Ding, ding, ding. The bell chimed thrice in succession, and over 2/3 of the white-robed young man's projections were instantly shattered, while the light above Douluo's head also crumbled. Nanali then immediately rushed off in pursuit of Tangwulin. She couldn't afford to be delayed by these two. Capturing Tangwulin was her top priority. However, Douluo definitely wasn't going to allow her to get away. An icy blue streak of light instantly surged toward her, and Nanali waved a hand to swivel her dark bell around to act as a shield against the oncoming attack. In her eyes, there was still a significant disparity between their powers, so if she wanted to escape, her two opponents definitely wouldn't be able to stop her. However, her judgment proved to be incorrect on this occasion. A burst of glacial aura instantly swept forth, making her feel as if her entire mind had been frozen solid, and she plummeted from the sky like a dead weight. The massive halberd also struck her in a vicious manner thereafter, and in this dire situation, Nanali abruptly fused as one with her dark bell, so the halberd struck the bell amid a thunderous clang. As a result, the white-robed young man shuddered as if he had suffered an electric shock, and blood began to pour out of his nose and mouth. This was the most fearsome aspect about a soundwave-type martial soul. Even if it were being struck by an attack, it could retaliate by using the clash to unleash soundwave attacks of its own. However, Nanali certainly wasn't enjoying herself either. Her dark bell still hadn't fully recovered after being struck by the dragon-slaying saber, so being struck by the halberd now certainly wasn't doing her any favors. Cracks instantly appeared over a large area of the dark bell surface, and Nanali was at the height of her fury. Her 8th soul ring instantly lit up, and a terrifying bell chime rang out across the entire train station. Even the sky above the train station had turned a dark green color in the blink of an eye. In the air above, a massive bell with a radius in excess of 50 meters began to sway, and if it were allowed to chime, all of the living beings in the entire train station would most likely be reduced to dust in an instant. However, right at this moment, an authoritative voice rang out from above. Don't you dare. The sky turned a scorching white color, and a powerful pillar of dazzling light descended from above, piercing directly through the huge bell in the air. Nanali let loose an anguished cry and gritted her teeth before throwing up a mouthful of black blood. At the same time, she fused into the black blood and fled into the distance as a streak of crimson light, flying away as quickly as a shooting star. This was her darkness secret technique. Blood flee. The white-robed young man was about to give chase, but the authoritative voice up above sounded again. Let her go. Light flashed, and a figure descended out of nowhere, positioning himself in front of the white-robed young man and Douluo. Don't chase a cornered beast. I didn't think members of the Holy Spirit cult would dare to appear in Heaven Dou City again. Thanks so much for watching this video. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Also leave a comment down below with suggestions on what novels to read.